Hello everybody, my name is Carlos Silva, and today I will be talking to you about Java Web Front-End Framework applications. So basically, Java frameworks are software libraries that are created to make building Java web applications easier and more accessible to users. So Java front-end frameworks, they consist of pre-written code, they have classes, templates, components, and a lot of other structures that you can use for a Java web application. There are many Java frameworks that are used today and that are most popular. And for example, they have Blade, Vue that we just used in a previous video, Grails, as long as many other more. Um, these frameworks aren't all the same. They are definitely used for different purposes, for making websites or other web applications through the Java front-end frameworks. So there are a lot of benefits to using these front-end frameworks, but there are also some downsides to using it, and I'm going to go into the pros and the cons of these frameworks. So one of the pros that would be for using a Java framework would be the reliability. So it's already like a collection of pre-coded code for you to use in your own code, and that makes it a lot more reliable. It's been tested, and there's not going to be anything that's gonna mess up your code or anything like that. It's already been tested. There shouldn't be any bugs, and it'll make it easier for you to make your own web application. Another benefit to using a framework would be the quick use that you can get out of it. So if you have this reliable and dependable framework, it's going to be much quicker to write your own code because the framework is already doing all the heavy lifting. You don't need to do much in terms of actually building the entire thing, since you already have the foundation for you. And this leads into a faster and more accessible user experience. So these libraries already they can run on multiple different browsers, even mobile devices. So it's gonna look great across the board. You're not gonna have to worry about compatibility or conflicts with other browsers or even software that it runs on. Also, another benefit that you have is that if you're working on a collaborative effort with other people who are making a web application or something of that nature, you don't really have to, I guess, interpret other people's code. Since you already have that framework there, it's going to be a lot easier to decipher what does what, and you don't have to ask everyone, oh, what does this mean, or what does this mean. Since it's all standardized, it should all come easier to find and view what you need to code next. Now, with these frameworks also comes a list of disadvantages or cons. And one of the biggest cons out there is that web frameworks aren't really designed for simple applications. They're more large scale. So if you have like a simple application you want to do, there's going to be a ton of what they call bloatware, and it's just going to make your code bloated and very hard to read. And another point jumping off of that is that if you already have an application that you're working on, and say like halfway through you want to add a framework because you think it might be easier. Initially, it might be easier, and you see it that way, that it's going to be easier to implement this framework. But going into that process is just going to take more time out of your project, integrating that framework than rather than working on it. So even though it might be easier in the long run and initially, it's gonna be a long process to implement that framework. Another con that frameworks can introduce is that since they're always being updated, many updates can also introduce bugs and even break some of the code that you've already implemented. So since it's always changing, it's always being updated by a team of people who work on the framework, sometimes you might get an update and it might break some stuff, or it might introduce even more or new bugs into your code that you didn't have before. So that's always something to keep in mind when you have a framework. And finally, one of the last cons you have is training. When you have a large framework and you're building a large scale application and updating it and keeping it maintained, you're always going to have to train to use that specific framework. And since it's always changing, you might have to dole out new training courses or just keep your employees up to date, or even have to hassle to train new employees that come on to work to your web application framework. So in the end, it always comes down to a case-by-case basis of whether pros outweigh the cons of using a framework and whether or not you should use one. Ultimately, they are beneficial for large-scale web applications, and they do come in handy for even smaller scale ones that are designed for it. So this has been me talking about web front-ended frameworks, and I hope you enjoyed.